Hi Treacle Tarts, welcome to another Self-Love September video. In this video I'm going to be talking about something that I think of as toxic admiration, and it's the kind of admiration that you have for somebody which may stop you from actually pursuing your own dreams. It may convince you that you are not necessarily good enough to do what you want to do or get where you want to go, because you may be toxically comparing yourself to this person you are admiring. But I think toxic comparison also turns up in other ways as well. I think it can turn up in someone who is actually actively pursuing their dreams, but maybe they're giving all of the credit for their achievements and triumphs to the person that they are toxically admiring of. So toxic admiration can actually sometimes fuel somebody's sense of ambition and somebody's sense of capability or tenacity, but they're constantly only seeing themselves as being able to achieve those things because the person that they toxically admire paved the way or gave them the opportunity or opened the door for them. So toxic admiration is something that I have recognised and witnessed in a number of different ways over the years, and I think it's contrary to self-love, because I think there are certainly healthy ways to admire someone, and then there are the not so healthy ways that we get caught up in, where we're actually lessening our own value or we're refusing to see our own greatness because we're telling ourselves that any greatness that we exhibit and any strength that we exhibit really comes from this source, this person that we admire. I personally feel that it is healthy to admire people, and it is healthy to look at things that other people have accomplished and think of them as a benchmark or use them for inspiration. But I definitely think there is a shadow side to that. Surprise, surprise, I think there's a shadow side to something. So that's what this particular video is about. Some people will find themselves in a situation sometimes in life where they tell themselves there's no point in even starting a project or pursuing a dream because this person has already done it better. This person's material is already out there. This person is just so amazing in all these various ways. And it stops an individual from really pursuing their dreams and recognizing what they can achieve and learning what their potential really is, which of course is really sad and shit. And I would like to create a resource that at least stops one person from standing on the sidelines in their own life convincing themselves that they can't do what they want to do because they're not ever going to be that particular individual. But like I said, there are so many different situations where a person is actually exhibiting momentum. They are kind of making headway towards something that they want to achieve. They are living their life in an exciting way or a way where they're challenging themselves, but again, they may not be giving themselves that credit. They may be honouring somebody else so much, and granted, that person may very well have inspired you to take the plunge or take that leap and launch into your future, and by all means give them some credit for that. But there's obviously this toxic end of the spectrum where a person is really kind of giving up all of the credit that they should be taking for overcoming their challenges and going in pursuit of their goals, and they're laying all of that at the foot of somebody that they really admire. And to me, that's where it becomes toxic. Giving credit to somebody whose ideas have inspired you is an honourable thing to do. Giving shine where shine is due is definitely an honourable thing to do. I'm in no way saying that it's not appropriate to give somebody some recognition and honour them for the contributions they've given to you in your life, whatever those contributions may have been. I think that this is very true of any kind of work in academia or any kind of writing of books or creation of resources. There's usually a bunch of people that have come before you, that have done things before you, that inspired you in some way, and there is nothing wrong with giving those people recognition. I think that's really important, and I think that it's also important for us, it's important for our egos and for our psyches, that we don't tell ourselves that we are the first and last word in something, that we don't tell ourselves that we came along and we created something out of thin air without being inspired by anyone. The vast majority of people that create something, that put something out into the world, or that go on a specific journey, whether that's a journey of spiritual discovery, creative endeavours, whatever it is, will normally have a bunch of people in mind whose work has inspired them, whose words have inspired them, whose challenges have inspired them. And I think it's amazing to give that credit and give that recognition. Unfortunately, sometimes you come across a situation in life where somebody feels unable to pay homage or give credit to someone who's inspired them without really devaluing their own efforts and devaluing their own work. If this is you right now, or if this has ever been you, there is definitely a healthy way and a conscious way to give somebody credit or recognise the contribution someone has made in your life without overlooking the particular challenges that you had to get through to come to the point that you're at. We need to be able to simultaneously honour other people and what they've done whilst honouring ourselves also. There are some people who find themselves in a situation in their lives where they are directly involved with the person that they toxically admire. So for a lot of people, they may toxically admire a celebrity or a content creator or something like that. But for other people, the person that they toxically admire is their sibling or their friend or their parent. And unfortunately, sometimes there can be a dynamic that is set up between a person and the individual they toxically admire, where the toxically admired individual is really very much enjoying that role and is wanting to keep that gravy train rolling at all costs. So you may find when you step away from a relationship where you feel like toxic admiration is present, that the other person actually is fueling that kind of admiration from you. They want to see you admire them that way. Maybe it gives their ego something. Maybe it makes them feel special or seen or highlighted or elevated. And that can be a difficult thing because it makes it that much harder to assess your behavior, assess your mindset, and step away and actually kind of reformulate it so that you are also honoring yourself at the same time. Whenever you want to change something within the fabric of a relationship in your life, you can do so in a whole bunch of subtle ways where you don't necessarily have to plainly communicate your frustrations. You don't have to sit down and have a summit about it. There's loads of subtle ways in which you can kind of announce, if you like, that you are breaking away from a dynamic that is toxic for you. And in this particular situation, if you know that somebody in your midst is probably fueling your toxic admiration, probably enjoying it slightly, probably setting up particular scenarios where they can experience it, then you kind of need to make a break away from that. You need to set some boundaries around yourself, and you need to be conscious of the behavior that you are exhibiting around that person, so that next time you're in the midst of that person or you're in conversation with them, your behavior is different and you do not succumb to the patterns of toxic admiration that you had previously been showing. This is difficult. I'm not saying it's easy. It's very hard sometimes to step away from a particular dynamic that you've been fueling and you've been kind of perpetuating. However, it is very healthy for you and just about anyone else in your life and your relationship together if you make sure your admiration levels are measured, because when you admire somebody overly, you are actually kind of distancing yourself from them because you are idealizing them in a way. And a lot of admiration, when it gets to that kind of level, is idealism. It's idealizing a person, it's seeing them in a specific way, which has got more to do with how you want to see them than how they really are. And like I said, there may be some people in your life who enjoy that kind of admiration, but it's not good for them and it's not good for you. Admiring someone in your life to such a degree that you're giving them credit for your triumphs and you're really kind of laying it on quite thick is probably going to make them feel that they can't really get close to you, that you don't really know them, and there's going to be that divide, you know, because there's actually kind of a pedestal. There is a hierarchy that you have kind of enforced, and that keeps a distance between you and that person that you could know in a much more intimate way. This is why when we toxically admire celebrities, it becomes particularly difficult, because there is really no way a lot of the time to see what goes on behind the curtain. We can tell ourselves all kinds of weird things about what their life is like when they're not on screen or when they're not being interviewed or whatever. We can create this really massive sort of HD fantasy of what they're like, who they are, what they think, you know, what their responses to things are. And we can't really know any of that. But when we look at a celebrity and we think of them in those terms, there is really no way to gather any proof to the contrary. So it becomes easy to hyperinflate your sense of toxic admiration in that instance. Whereas when you know someone, yes, they have a bigger chance to fall from grace because you know them and you are around them, you spend time with them. But in a way, it's also so much more of a shame because you could really have a proper functioning relationship with that person and get to know them on a real level, rather than idealizing them and therefore maybe placing pressure on them to maintain the way that you view them through your eyes. Recognizing that every single human being is flawed and every single human being is capable of fucking up is such an important part of the self-love journey. We need to make sure that we are not disparaging ourselves and thinking of ourselves as less than some elevated, perfect person. We need to make sure as well, just like that meme says that goes around the internet sometimes, that we're not comparing our everyday to somebody else's highlight reel. What somebody chooses to project into the world, what somebody chooses to show, the persona that they carry around with them, is part of a much larger sort of piece of land that is their identity. Sometimes we're only looking at 5% of what somebody actually is, and even that 5% is very polished and very well put together. We need to remember that as well, and that's a big part of the self-love journey in the age of social media, So many people forget this, myself included. I actually have found myself, for sure, comparing my everyday to somebody else's highlight reel, comparing my apartment to somebody else's very, very pristine shot on Instagram that's got nothing to do with what the rest of their apartment looks like, and it's got nothing to do with what their life looks like or what their mind looks like. And yet there I am, allowing this symbol, this photo on the internet to dictate how I feel about my life and my surroundings and what I'm doing during the course of the day. It's very, very easy to get stuck into a trap like that. It does feed into toxic admiration. It definitely makes you feel less than. It definitely makes you feel like demeaned and disempowered. And obviously all of that is supremely unself-loving. When somebody is putting something forth and they are curating it and they're presenting it to the world, whether it's in person or online, we have to remember that a lot of the time, even if it's unintentional on the part of the person putting it out, it is intended to be aspirational in nature. I think we are heavily affected by advertising. I think we're heavily affected by marketing. And obviously a lot of the imagery that is placed into marketing and advertising is supposed to be aspirational. You're supposed to feel like you can aspire to have that person's life in the advertisement or whatever. And believe me, I'm a big fan of fashion magazines and I see this happen, and it's really very, very toxic sometimes in the fashion industry. This idea that you can aspire to be like this person and have their life if you just buy the new Miu Miu bag or the new Fendi thing or the new whatever. I think that rubs off onto a lot of people. I think it influences the way people want to put things across, and obviously feeding into that there's just this sense that you want people to think of you in a certain way, and that can definitely fuel toxic admiration. It can make you believe and really feel through to the core of you that this person is this specific thing that they're putting out. And if the only way that you're really viewing somebody is through their Instagram account or through what they say to you at a party when they're dressed to impress and they're talking about the very best aspects of their lives, then you really need to stop and sit with that and check in with yourself and ask yourself as well if it is messing with your own journey of self-love and self-acceptance, because chances are it actually is messing with those things. Sometimes we look at somebody else's story, we look at what somebody else has achieved or what they've been through and what they've managed to overcome, and instead of being impressed by that and allowing it to fuel us on our own journey, instead we kind of come to this point where we use it as an excuse not to take action. We use it as a form of self-sabotage. We say to ourselves, we're never going to be like that individual, you know, we're never going to be able to shine in the same way, and we can use it to put our own plans on the back burner. I would definitely ask yourself to check in with that. Ask yourself if you're doing that right now, or if you ever have done that. That is very insidious, but I think it's also very common, to be honest with you. Sometimes it is important to ask yourself how you would feel if one of your faves let you down. Like if you really just had this big sinking feeling, recognizing that they'd done something or said something that you feel was really out of character for how you felt they were or how they portrayed themselves. How would you feel if they really came down a notch or two on the big pedestal that you've put them on? And the reason I want to ask this is because everybody is just so human, everybody is so multifaceted, and it is really important to understand that when you idealize somebody beyond any ability to connect to them as a human being, you are setting yourself up for failure. And if you know that person or you interact with that person, you're setting the relationship up for failure as well in the same breath. And the other thing I want to say, and I don't want to get too dark here, I don't want to go too far down this particular avenue, but I want to kind of set the sparks off in your head, because I think so many of you will get what I mean by this. Toxic admiration is something that can be built up around a person who relies upon it in order to be able to be devious and underhanded and get away with blue bloody murder. The other day I watched a documentary about Bill Cosby, and it really made me cry. I was really crying by the end, and it was making me think about other people like Jimmy Savile and just tons of big celebrities who have basically utilized other people's toxic comparison, people being in awe of them, people really just elevating them up to such a height above human that they were able to get away with all kinds of bullshit for so long. It is insidious, you know, it is a way for people to really kind of go under the radar and carry on perpetuating loads of awful bullshit because everybody is so enthralled. And it is something that these predatory people rely upon. They rely upon a really extreme form of admiration that stops somebody from thinking of somebody as human and fallible and flawed and maybe dangerous and maybe predatory. All I'm saying is that blind admiration is often a tool to perpetuate deceit and manipulation. And we do need to recognize that we can feed into that societally when we put somebody on a pedestal that is beyond question, when we we show that somebody is above reproach, when we feel like somebody it can do no wrong, it is dangerous. It can go to really dangerous places. And for me, working on the shadow stuff is not just personal, it's political and it's collective as well. And we need to look at how we are perpetuating various different structures and mindsets by looking at what's going on for us in our personal lives and seeing somebody as above any criticism or judgment and being in awe of them to the extent where it's actually affecting our ability to see ourselves as worthy or to make moves in the world can sometimes lead to more dangerous things, and it has many times. I would definitely recommend that if you find yourself in a position where you're praising somebody that you really admire, that you really look up to, if you're talking about how they affected your work or how they positively influenced you, in the same breath go on to recognize something that you have done yourself. Go on to praise something that you actually did or that you contributed. So for example, if you're talking about how somebody's work really inspired your own work, don't forget to talk about your own work in the same breath. If you want to talk about how somebody's research or somebody's book really paved the way for you, then by all means you can say, you know, this person's resource and this person's approach really paved the way for me. But then don't forget to talk about how you expanded upon that work. How did you build upon it? What have you been trying to do with what you're trying to achieve? And talk about that. It doesn't have to be bigging yourself up and hyping your achievements up and really just blowing your own head up with your own egoic sense of self, but it is important to recognize that, yeah, you jumped beyond something, you used something as a stepping stone, as a launch pad, and it's appropriate to give the creator of whatever thing that was credit. But what you don't want to do is forget that you've also been on a journey. You've also been striving to achieve things. You've also been stepping out of your comfort zone. There's nothing wrong with talking about that and addressing that as well. In fact, it almost seems weird that somebody wouldn't. If someone's talking about resources that have paved the way or a particular individual who's been instrumental in someone's journey, it kind of seems weird that you'd only leave it at that, you know. Surely it's proper and correct that you go on to talk about your own journey as well. So I would definitely challenge you to do that. Whenever you hear yourself praising someone or expressing that you're impressed by someone and they've had an influence on you, talk about how they had an influence on you and how you're using that influence to get things done. And the same way, if you're thinking about someone, if you've got someone in mind and you're just really thinking about how what they've done is so great and it's helped you, then also think about how you have taken that work and built upon it, or indeed how you intend to and how you're going to, and then make a solid plan of action for how that's going to be achieved. This is particularly important if someone's helped you with your journey of self-development, personal growth, spiritual sovereignty. You really want to think about how you've taken whatever they've given to you and used it, and how hard that was, but how you stayed the course and you did it anyway. And that's cause to praise yourself. That's a reason to honor yourself. Make sure that you are being yourself rather than trying to be them. I think a lot of the time with toxic admiration, it can lead to things like imitation, copycatting, really trying to just become them and assimilate yourself with them so closely that you forget about your individual perspective. And I would definitely recommend, if you think that you're doing this or you're showing signs of wanting to do this, think about what you would choose if they weren't around to lead the way. So, you know, if you think that you're kind of copying how they dress or how they talk or the kinds of things they're interested in or whatever, just think for yourself about a parallel universe where they do not exist and none of the stuff they're talking about bears any relevance because they've never talked about it, because they're not there, they don't exist. What would really inspire you about the world right now? You know, really think about where you are in your life, what you are experiencing, what you are seeing in culture, what you are seeing around you, who you're talking to aside from them, who you're involving yourself with aside from them. Take them out of the equation completely and think to yourself, would I still be dressing the same way, saying the same things, being interested in the same stuff, or would there be a whole bunch of new things that I want to address and get into? That can be a very illuminating exercise. It can be a little bit of mental gymnastics to do it, but it's definitely well worth doing, because when we move into the toxic admiration phase, or the toxic admiration spectrum if you like, then we really are in danger of losing ourselves, losing what is most unique and cool and influential about us, and moving into this state of being where we're just really trying to pick up the breadcrumbs that they're leaving behind as they make decisions and as they express themselves, and we're picking up and consuming those breadcrumbs and kind of churning them out, but they are not a true representation of who we are authentically authentically at all. There's a difference between taking inspiration from someone and directly imitating them or copycatting them, or feeling like you've got to become them and you've got to agree with everything that they say. You've got to exude certain parts of their character that really have nothing to do with who you are as a human being. At the beginning of a creative or spiritual journey in particular, it's normal to experiment with different people's ideas and do different things that people have advised or that people are trying for themselves, but it's quite another thing to feel like you've got to take all of that on because it's what this particular person is exuding. That's got nothing to do with you, and you've absolutely got a duty to yourself to avoid copycatting or imitation. It's just really soul-sucking. It doesn't really allow you to get to the depths of who you are as a human being, and it might feel temporarily good, and it might feel like you're being a bit of a shapeshifter and you're giving yourself access to power that you feel that you don't actually have as an individual. But I think that feeling is short-lived, and I think that it's really important that we go to a deeper place and we think about who we are authentically. There may be some overlap with somebody that you admire, without any doubt, but I think toxic admiration is when you don't realise that. It's when you don't have access to that understanding and you feel like you just have to assimilate in order to be accepted, or in order to be as good as they are, or in order to feel like you can compare your journey to theirs in some way. And that's where it all goes wrong. It's all yucky. It's bleh. Oh, it's yucky. Cough that shit up. It's no good. Sometimes the roots of toxic admiration can come from a place in your past. You may want to check the timeline of your life. You may want to look at your childhood. You may want to think about any situation or relationship where you may have been encouraged to toxically admire somebody. You may want to think about what your parental caregivers taught you about the nature of admiration in general, and the way that they may have admired people or whatever. I think that's sometimes a good starting point if you realise you're struggling with toxic admiration. And I will say that there are so many ways, as I said at the beginning, to admire somebody healthily and functionally. When you admire someone, you normally admire a part of what they've done, or a characteristic that they exhibit that you recognise you would like to bring to the fore in yourself more, or you may even already see it in yourself, which is supremely self-loving. When you admire someone for something that you also exude, I love that. I'm totally on board for that. But it doesn't always happen that way. A lot of the time we do admire somebody or feel ourselves being impressed by somebody because they exude something that we haven't quite gotten a handle on yet, or we wish that we had more of. And I think it's just important to recognise that and then think about the steps that you are going to take to exude that characteristic or that mindset yourself, and actually really find that seed of potential within you. Admiring someone in a functional, healthy way means seeing them as a human being, recognising that they are capable of mistakes, recognising that they themselves are full of flaws and complexities, recognising that their very nature is paradoxical and nuanced and weird and fucked up and whatever that symbolises, that's what they are just as much as that's what you are. Admiring someone in a healthy way means recognising that what they put forth in their persona is not the whole animal, and it also means, I think, recognising that having a public persona is not a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a normal part of interacting in the world. There are layers to people, but it's very important that you recognise that being dazzled by some of the outer layers of a person does not mean that that is who they are in their soul. It does not mean that they've never had a dark night of the soul. It does not mean that they're never going to. And it does not mean that there are other areas of your lives where you would win the race instead of them. Baby cakes, thank you so much for absorbing this video content. I really hope you're enjoying Self-Love September. Don't forget to check out Self-Love Sunday over on SoundCloud. I do it every single Sunday on SoundCloud through September, and that's also a tradition of mine. You can download those audio files over on SoundCloud. I had great fun making them, and I hope you have fun absorbing them. Please hit me up down in the comments and let me know what you think of this topic, whether or not you've got anything that you want to add. I will really enjoy reading the comments through Self-Love September. It's one of my favourite things. Don't forget you can also catch me on social media, and if you're in the safe house and you're taking the masterclasses with me, don't forget, check the time and the date, be there or be square, grab the worksheet, print it out, whatever you want to do. So much love and self-love, guys. Blessed be.